Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Fantasy and Other Stuff podcast. I hope you're doing well. Today, we're going to be talking about the entire First Law trilogy. Normally, these recap slash review episodes would be over a single book, but I just finished the First Law trilogy a couple of days ago, and I really want to talk about it. So we're just going to do all three books. I'm not going to be able to get into as many specifics as I would like because this episode would take forever, but I'm going to give my general overview of the series and sort of my ideas and thoughts that came to me while I was reading it. And I've had several discussions now with other people, so I actually kind of enjoy that I have all these different perspectives that I can now kind of add to what I'm talking about here in this episode. So I'm very excited to just jump right into this, but first I gotta say that I have a Patreon now. I've had 2 people sign up, which is wild. I didn't think that anybody was gonna sign up this early on, and if you're one of those people, I haven't forgotten you. I'm gonna do the Patreon shout out every week on the main podcast episode, not in these recap reviews. But for anybody who is interested, the Patreon, you're going to get extra content in there, and you'll get a shout out in the videos. It's a great time. It's a great time. I haven't really posted anything in the Patreon yet, but I'm going to start doing that here soon. And yeah, if you want to support me, you can go find that in the link in the description. But first, let's get into these books before we do anything else. So I'm going to go ahead and just talk about the characters individually in this series. I was originally gonna do book by book talks, but I feel like that's not the best way to approach this because First Law, in my opinion, is best viewed as a complete picture. And if you're only talking about part of the story, you're only getting a fraction of everything that's going on. So for me to share my opinions about a character in the first book would be super disingenuous because it probably has changed drastically to the end of First Law. Because like many series, the details are extremely important in First Law, and it won't be until the last 30 pages that everything comes together. And I love that. But First Law does it in a way where I literally cannot share my thoughts about what I feel about characters without addressing their entire character arc. It's just impossible. So what I've done is I made a list here of all the characters, specifically of the point of views. I'm probably missing, I think I'm missing one, but I think I have them all written down here. And I'm just going to go from top to bottom in the order that I wrote them down. I'm going to share my thoughts about that character and their journey, and we'll see how that goes. So, at the top of this list is Dan Luthar. And I gotta say, guys, I know this is an unpopular opinion. I know a lot of people don't agree with me. He's a lot of people's least favorite character in the series. He was my favorite. He was my favorite character. I'm probably going to get flack for that from anybody who's read the series, but I really enjoyed his character arc. I think Glokta is most people's favorite, followed probably by Logan, but Jezal, to me, he had this really unique interior battle, this inside battle that he was fighting from, well, not the beginning to the end. At the beginning, he was definitely a pompous asshole, and I did not like him at all, but book 2 moving forward, that's another story. He started to really grow in book 2, and he started to learn more about the world. He got humbled, and that continuation of his journey all the way till the end was super captivating to me because we saw him become a better man, but it wasn't something that happened, overnight. He got humbled, he became a better man for a little bit, and then he wasn't quite able to shake off some of his prejudice right away. He wasn't able to just totally, shed all of his bad traits right away. So what ends up happening, this is going to be, I'm spoiling, obviously, in book 2, he's on the journey with that group that goes to retrieve the seed from the island on the end of the world, and he gets his face fucking clobbered in by a mace when they get ambushed by some, I think they were just bandits on the road, and, he's kind of in misery for half of this trip. His face is, half of his face at least, becomes somewhat of a mess. He gets this kind of ugly scar on his chin and his jaw, and he realizes that life is not that easy outside the walls of the city, and he starts to learn that perhaps there are worse fates in life than being bored. And I think a lot of what his character growth comes from is his relationship with Logan, which is one of my favorite parts of the entire series, is the way they start out hating each other, or at least Jezal hates Logan because he sees him as this savage, who's beneath him and his city ways. And then Logan has been living this rough and tumble life for his entire existence, so he kind of teaches Jezal lessons that Jezal needed to learn, things that are, kind of bring reality into focus for him, that Jezal clings onto like a lifeline throughout the rest of the series. One of my favorite things in book 3 is when Jezal, he's in some dire scenarios and he remembers things that Logan told him, sayings that Logan has for himself, stuff like, you have to be realistic about these things. And that's one of my favorite sayings that Logan has. Better to do it than live with the fear of it. I love those sayings in the first place, but seeing the way that Jezal took those sayings and applied them to his life and the things he was going through was super endearing to me. And in a series that is so bleak and so dark, it was nice to see this brotherly relationship actually have a positive impact on someone, because pretty much everything that happens in this series is horrible. It's just the worst thing ever just happens to every character. So it was nice to see something like that, and the way that they form this relationship with each other that is actually wholeheartedly real. It's something that's not fake or forced because they go through stuff together. And Logan especially, I'm going to talk about Logan later, but seeing how Jezal became somewhat of a soft spot for Logan and the way that he felt like he needed to protect him and be there for Jezal, I thought that was really cool. So that's one of the reasons I liked Jezal, is that he starts out as such a freaking dick. That first book, bro, I remember having a conversation with someone and being like, I hate this guy. He's the worst character ever. How am I supposed to root for him? He literally gazes at himself in the mirror and he's like, oh, I'm so beautiful. Oh my God. Oh, any woman would be lucky to have me. Oh my God, I'm so freaking pretty. And he's so lazy. And he just wins the Tournament of Champions, this fencing contest, but not through his own merit, but because Baez fucking makes him stronger with magic and shit. And he thinks he's so cool. And he looks down on everybody, even people who are in the same class as him. I hated him in the first book. Oh my God. But then his growth, he gets the redemption arc, and then the third book, I would argue that he has the most interesting plot line out of everyone, because he becomes the literal freaking king. And it's interesting the way that this plot line develops, because he becomes king and yet he loses power. He gains status, but he loses any semblance of individualism that he had before, which is a big theme in this book series, is this kind of nihilistic take on what the worst thing that could happen to someone in any scenario would be. And how do you make the worst out of becoming a king? Well, you become a king really just in status, and you kind of lose the ability to even interact with commoners. Everyone's groveling at your feet, and you can't form real connection. You're forced into a loveless marriage. Everyone's kind of politicking and scheming around you, and you have no actual power besides, kind of being able to pontificate and say things in an angry manner. And that is exactly what happens to Jezal. He kind of gets put in this situation, which was one of the more shocking scenes in the book series, I gotta say. There was foreshadowing, and I had discussions with people about it, where Baez on their journey is talking to him and telling him about great kings and the things they did, and I was like, why the hell is he telling Jezal this? Why would Jezal care in the first place? Also, why does Baez care? Because Baez is so mysterious, but I'm gonna save him for last, by the way. Baez, I'm gonna talk about him last, but and Jezal, this whole time, I was like, why is Baez telling him any of this? And then we find out that Baez obviously has kind of been pulling strings everywhere in this series, but then he raises Jezal to be king, and it's this it was a crazy plot twist to me. I kind of thought it was heading somewhere in that direction, but I didn't see a path forward to Jezal becoming king, so when it happened, it still shocked me. And then seeing kind of the fallout of that, and I got so frustrated with Jezal, because part of what I liked about his arc is that, again, he doesn't immediately become a better man. He has his redemption arc, and he can't shed everything. So he's still pretty much a spineless coward in the third book. He's still kind of full of himself sometimes. There's a part of him that thinks he deserves to be king, and he's kind of unable to step up for himself. So he becomes kind of self-pitying drunkard who really is just kind of useless. And I was so frustrated with him because you see flashes in book 3 all throughout of the man he could be, the good man that he could be, and he just keeps failing to meet that expectation. He keeps falling short of what he could be, and that is so much more engaging than just like giving him a redemption arc, and then all of a sudden, he's a good man. Like, it was way more interesting to see him try and fail to be a better man, but the reason you root for him is because he's actively trying, and you see him trying, and situation kind of makes it difficult for him to do much, so he, you kind of give him some room for empathy, and I really was sad the way that his entire arc ends, where he's essentially a puppet for Baez in the end, and he has no friends left anymore, nobody who he can just sit and talk with. His wife doesn't love him. He's kind of just this isolated man who will probably never have another genuine connection in his life, which is really sad. And he can't make any substantial change in the kingdom. And now that he's become a better man, that's something that he wants. He wants to do better for the people. And dude, oh my God. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself actually, because after the big battle at the city, because there's a giant, the Gurkish invasion happens, and they all attack the big city, right? In book 3. And Jezal, he literally afterwards, he's like in the trenches. He's like moving rubble off the streets. He's visiting the hospitals, and he truly steps into the role of being a king, and he's charitable. He's out there doing work for the people, and he is out there grinding because he feels responsible for everything that happened. He's the king. He's being the better man that we knew he could be. And that to me was like the conclusion of his arc emotionally, was him finally becoming that man that he had been building up towards. And it just sucks that he gets that, and then he kind of has like one of the sadder endings in the book, is like he finally improves, and then he just gets slapped in the face. And you know what, actually, he did more than just become a better man. He got a fucking spine in the end. He tried to step up to Baez. He tried to tell Baez off. He tried to be like, I don't need you here anymore, you can leave. But obviously Baez is a fucking wizard, and there was no chance about he was going to let that slide, But, man, Jezal, I really loved his internal struggle. I thought it was very captivating and engaging past book 1. And I would be interested to go back and read book 1 again and see if my feelings have changed about the way he's introduced. Which, in book 1, by the way, he says, I look nothing like my brothers. And I remembered that comment. And at the end, when you find out that he wasn't related to his brothers at all, and that he was actually bought from a fucking whorehouse by Baez to be planted as king in the future, genius writing to just throw in like that one little detail of Jezal being like, wow, I just got all the good looks. No one in my family looks like this. It's because you're not related to them. Whew, genius writing. I loved that a lot. But anyway, I've gone on way too long about Jezal, so I gotta move on. I really want to talk now about Logan. Logan is probably my second favorite character. I think that's probably why I wrote them first too. They're just who came to mind. But Logan has pretty much the inverse arc of Jezal. And I picked up on that only in the last, 2 chapters of the third book, was that they start out at total different ends of the spectrum in terms of the kind of man that they are. And by the end of the book, I actually liked Jezal as a person more than I liked Logan as a person. I don't know if that's a popular opinion, but Logan, by the end of the series, once you know everything that he has done in the past, stuff that he admits to the reader in his own internal monologue, but once you learn, the depth of what he's done and how he essentially was 100% responsible for the war in the North, how he caused all of that bloodshed, you kind of start to look at him a little different. And this being after, okay, listen, for the things he does when he's in the Bloody Nine mode, when he goes Berserker mode, I don't necessarily hold it against him, because it's clear it's like an alter ego. He goes into this rage that he can't control. But you kind of get some hints at the end that maybe he was a little bit more cognizant of what he was doing all along than he was letting on. Because I think it's when, at the very end, he's going Berserker mode and he sees Dogman, and it says specifically in the text that the Bloody Nine raises his sword and Logan watches. So does that mean he's been aware this whole time? I don't know. I could just be overthinking things. I want to like Logan, but by the end of the series, it's kind of hard to not look at him as somewhat of a monster. He is closer to being evil than he is to being good by the end of the series. But at the beginning of the series, to me, I was like, I remember hearing so many things on the internet of just like, every character is so gray in this series. Every character is so morally ambiguous. But Logan, at the beginning of the series, I didn't think that at all. He was such a good person. Like, the first thing you see him do is save Baez's apprentice's life. Like, he carries him through carries him through miles of this storm that's raging around, and he's a good man. Like, he's generally nice to everyone. He's got this calm demeanor. He doesn't want to kill anybody, so when he goes Bloody Nine mode, he has regrets and like he tries to stop it from happening, right? So at the beginning of the series and through the second book, especially when he's becoming like a brother to Jezal, I was like, this guy is not morally ambiguous. Like, sure, maybe he did some shit in his past, but like, it can't be that bad. Like, he must have been this good of a person from the beginning, even though that's kind of stupid for me to say because Logan himself admits that he was a horrible person in the past. And once you get context, which by context, I mean in the third book, after the Northmen, there's one of my, again, all my favorite parts are in the third book, but the Northmen are fighting Bethid, the king in the north, right? And they have this giant battle, and then Logan goes berserker mode in this circle. They do like a one-on-one battle between him and this giant who's working for Bethid, which was probably the best fight in the entire series. It was awesome. He goes berserker mode again, and he smashes Bethid's head in, but before that happens, he actually talks to Bethid, and Bethid reveals some information that Logan doesn't deny, and he just kind of accepts. Logan is the reason that everything happened. He pushed Bethid over and over into conflicts. He started blood feuds. He started all of these things. He left a trail of corpses in his past. And so, looking back on the first book, to that first scene that we see Logan in, where he's fighting the Shanka up in the north, the like golem creatures or whatever, right? And he falls into the river, and then when he gets out, he just kind of accepts that like all of his friends would have died, and he just leaves. And at first, I remember reading that and being like, huh, like he wouldn't go check? That seems kind of weird. Now, I have a theory, and I feel pretty good about this theory as to why he did that. It wasn't because he thought they were actually dead. I think maybe a part of him thought they were actually dead, but I don't think he fully believed that. I think he saw an opportunity to run away. I think that's what was going through his mind. He said, I can get away. Everyone's going to think I'm dead. I have a chance to escape the mess that I have created. And in that light, Logan is kind of a coward. I hate saying that, but he's kind of a coward. If he was running away from all these conflicts that he created, that's a cowardly thing to do, and it kind of fits in with a lot of the things that we see about him early on. When he's in a fight, he's terrified. When he's in all these situations, like, yes, he steps up to the plate. Yes, he fights tooth and nail, and he does it. And he goes, he rages against the battle, you know, but he's always scared. He's always scared before you go in, which I think is also meant to just humanize him, not make him just, you know, a brute with no fear of death. But kind of fits in with that theme of maybe he's just kind of a coward sometimes. Maybe he's just scared of what he's created, the mess that he's created, and he was trying to run away from it. And he was trying to be a better man. He saw a chance for him to be a better man and to get away from the North, where it's just survival of the fittest, and where he had hurt so many people, you know? And so in that light, he is a good man who fails to escape his past. And I think that is the total opposite of Jezal, who is a bad man who is able to overcome his past to become a better man. And I think that's such a unique inverse, especially with the way that they interact with each other and the way their relationship develops over time. But Logan, probably the most badass character in the... not probably. He is the most badass character in the entire series. Every single one of his fights was fucking awesome. Every time that the Bloody Nine came out, it was fucking awesome. The first time that the Bloody Nine came out in the first book, because the first book's kind of slow. It's a lot of just setup and people talking to each other. And then boom, at the end, Bloody Nine fucks some people up. It is awesome. And I'm a sucker for berserker modes in general. I think that's like the coolest shit that you can give a character. It's always awesome. It's literally never not cool when a character goes berserker mode, okay? I will die on this hill. Berserker mode is literally the best fantasy power, okay? Fuck magic systems. Give me berserker mode, all right? And actually, whoa, I just made a connection in my brain. Stormlight Archive fans. I'm going way off track right now, but if you've read the Stormlight Archives and you've read First Law, okay? Isn't Dalinar just the same character as Logan? I mean, they have way different ways that their plot lines go, but think of Dalinar at the beginning of Stormlight Archive. Think of Logan at the beginning of First Law. They both have a berserker mode. Dalinar's is the thrill. Logan is the Bloody Nine, right? They've both done horrible things in their past. They're both fucking war criminals, and they're both trying to be better men, and they're trying to outrun their past. Dalinar literally, he's literally, I'm not going to spoil it, just in case there's anybody who hasn't read it, but they're the same character. And then they get, I can't, again, no spoilers, but they get raised to a higher position of sorts. Oh, interesting. Interesting. I like this connection. Dalinar and Logan are the same character, but with very, very, very different outcomes in their character arcs. Yeah, I like that. I like that comparison. And let me know if you feel the same way. I think that's a pretty apt comparison. But wow. Okay. Anyway, I'm done with Logan. He's one of my favorite characters. He's one of those characters who. Also, the ending, I want to mention this also. The way that he starts by falling into a river and then ends by falling into a river and we never find out his fate. Thematically perfect for his character. He'll never be able to outrun his past. He'll never be able to escape all of the feuds that he's created. So he falls back into a river and he's on the run again because Black Dow tries to kill him at the very end. Genius. I am a sucker for thematic writing. Logan is written perfectly in terms of themes, and that is just, it's a perfect ending, dude. I loved his character arc, the way that it developed and the way you learn everything about it. It's genius. It's genius character writing, because I have never encountered a character that I have more mixed feelings on, I don't think. Like, I love Logan, but I kind of hate him because he did this to himself. It's genius, man. Oh my god, I loved Logan. I don't think I enjoyed his internal struggle as much as Jezel's, mostly because he spends so long denying everything. And I don't know. Maybe I'll change my mind on that. Maybe I'll change my mind on that. But let's move on. Now, I feel like I have to talk about Glokta. I know Glokta is like a lot of people's favorite character in First Law. He's the character I hear mentioned most often. I know he's been like at the top of best fantasy characters of all time lists. I love Glokta, don't get me wrong. I wasn't super into his plot sometimes. I don't know why. I'm not always super in it for politicking, and don't get me wrong, Glokta has some of the best moments in all of the series, and he has probably the best characterization of all the characters. I fully understood Glokta's state of mind, his viewpoint, the way he viewed the world. I fully understood it. I got Glokta, and his character is also so interesting. He's a fucking torturer. In any other book series, he would be a villain, absolutely. And he is somewhat of a villain. He kills innocent people several times in this series, and he does things that are extremely horrible to people, and we watch him do it. But he has a soft side. And sometimes he gives mercy to people. Sometimes he lets people go. And he treats people kind of the way that they treat him. If they treat him like he's some disgusting cripple, he treats them with disdain. If they treat him like a person, just like a normal person, and they're kind to him, he kind of jokes around with them. I mean, it's like pessimistic, nihilistic joking, but like he'll throw some bones their way, and they'll have a chuckle together. And like West, when West comes and visits him, he's so horrible to West when he first arrived because he thinks that West like abandoned him after he got tortured in the Gurkish dungeons, right? But then West is like, no, I tried to visit you. Your mother didn't let me visit you or whatever. And once he realizes that like West never abandoned him truly, he's like super nice to him, and he's like apologetic. So Glokta has a nice side, but because of what he went through, he's kind of just numb to pain. He's kind of numb to harming other people because he himself has been through so much. But I got off track because I was talking about his plot, and then I got really into his character because his character is genius. But his plot. In the first book, it was probably the most engaging of the plots because, like I said, the first book's kind of slow. It's a lot of politicking and just setting up everything, and it's just people, talking to each other in rooms, and that's kind of Glocta's whole thing. So that's when the intrigue starts for him. We start to get some interesting tidbits about the government and everything, and what Glocta knows, and sort of how powers are divided, and that to me was probably the best part of the first book. In the second book, it gets even more interesting because he has to defend this city, and he has to kind of forge alliances and trick people and figure out who's scheming against him, who's not scheming against him. And it's interesting, but it was also kind of measured up against a bunch of other plot lines that I thought were far more interesting, like the whole group that was going to retrieve the seed. I mean, they were fighting Shanka in the ancient ruins of an ancient city that was destroyed by the old magic. And then we've got West up in the north with the Northmen, and they're hiking through the desolate north wasteland of snow, and they're fighting battles and shit. And then there's Glocta talking to people. And I'm the way I just said that made it sound bad. It was still extremely interesting. This entire series is a 10 out of fucking 10, so literally every part of it is incredible. But compared to what was going on in the other plot lines, sometimes it was a little boring for me. And boring is probably the wrong word. I guess less engaging. I wasn't as interested in finding out who the traitor was, because I just didn't, I wanted Glocta to win, but there's a traitor in the city that he's sent to protect, and I didn't really care who it was. I was just like, all right, whatever. Let's just get on to you figuring out how to defend the city, which is another interesting part of that whole plot line, is him, having to somehow defend this indefensible city, and he finds a way, and then he has to get a loan from a bank. It turns out the bank was Baez all along. That doesn't happen until the third book, but genius writing also, that whole thing. Baez has his fingers in every single one of these plot lines, and you don't know it until the end, but Glocta's, the way that his plot line ends up intersecting with Baez's is chef's kiss, bro. Oh my god. Because now, I just talked about it. I'm just going to jump into book 3. I did like his plotline more in book 3 because while there's a giant battle raging around them in the city, Glocta's literally crawling through the sewers, just pursuing his own agenda, just single-mindedly going after each and every one of the loose ends that he has to tie up, because he's dead either way. He's dead if the city's overtaken. He's dead if they win and his enemies survive that are within the government, right? And I thought that was just such a fun juxtaposition to all the carnage and chaos that was going on in the city. That was just awesome. But Glocta's his storyline in that entire book, I really liked the way that his relationship with Artie progressed, because Artie, I was invested in her and Jezel's relationship, but Glocta was kind of able, that was just pure animal, sex drive that they kind of shared. Not Jezel. Jezel actually cared about her, but I don't think she ever really cared about him. And Glocta was able to, I guess, give her more of an intellectual relationship. That's a weird way of putting it, but seeing their friendship develop, and then they end up getting married, obviously, at the end, and I thought that was actually fitting. If anything, I would say that those two are the only two that get a happy ending, because Artie is able to overcome her alcoholism with her new thing in life being taking care of Glocta and being married and having this secure life where she's married to someone powerful. And Glocta gets someone who loves him, or loves him is maybe not the right word, but loves him in the way that she can love him, and he gets someone who cares about him. And I don't think he ever expected to have that again. So he kind of gets a happy ending. But I'm getting ahead of myself. As Glocta starts to unravel the mystery after the Archlector tries to kill him, and he learns that the Archlector is trying to stop Baez, which, by the way, Glocta may have shot himself in the foot there. I don't know if Sult's thing was going to work. I don't know if he was going to be able to stop Baez, but if he'd been able to, Glocta might have had a happier ending. I mean, he could have, let the ritual happen that they were doing. Maybe it stops Baez. Baez dies. Well, I don't know. It's kind of hard to say, but he may have shot himself in the foot, because, in my opinion, Baez is unequivocally the villain of everything that happened in this entire series. But I'm going to talk about Baez last, so let's refrain from getting too far into that. But anyway, he unravels everything, and fuck Archlector Salt. I'm not saying that he was like a good guy, but he had the right idea trying to stop Baez. Anyway, so Galacta, he uncovers everything, right? And we still don't have an answer. Like, who the fuck is this bank? And like, why were they having him investigate or Archlector Salt? And like, what was going on? Because he was stuck between literally a rock and a hard place. Two opposing forces wanted him to investigate each other, and he couldn't deny either of them, right? But who was the bank? And then it turns out to be Baez the entire time. And Baez not only has been manipulating Jezzel and literally that whole group, but Jezzel specifically, he's been manipulating Glokta from the shadows. Incredible reveal, dude. Incredible reveal. It makes everything fit together so well, and I definitely did not see it coming. I think like in the last like 30 pages, I was like, there's no way it's anyone but Baez, right? Like, who else would it be? Like, it wouldn't make any sense for there to be another reveal or twist. So I kind of saw it coming in like the last moment, but it wasn't until the last moment that I was kind of thinking, okay, maybe it's Baez, right? But it just fit together so well. And I just loved Glokta's characterization. I can't think of another series that has made such a repulsive and, horrible person likable. I mean, I genuinely loved Glokta. I was rooting for him the whole time. I wanted him to win at every turn, even though he killed innocent people. But then he also spared innocent people sometimes. Like a couple of times, maybe. More often than not, he had them killed. But sometimes he had mercy. Sometimes. Okay, he wasn't that bad of a person. Anyway, Glokta was great. Not my favorite, but he was an amazing character. I can concur with everyone else. All right, let me look at my list again real quick. Let's see. Oh yeah, Pharaoh. I'm going to have not a lot to say about Pharaoh. Because her plotline, if I had any complaint about First Law, I wish that her plotline had a little bit more substance. Because we get characterization for her. It's pretty basic. She's this feral woman who used to be a slave. She was raped repeatedly, and she wants revenge. Pretty basic setup for a character, and she remains that way for most of the series. Her relationship with Logan, I will say, was another, again, like Logan's relationship with Jezzel, Logan's relationship with Pharaoh is also another endearing part of the entire series, where they find this pseudo love for each other. They're both warriors. They both know they can have each other's back. They fight together several times, and they end up sleeping together, and they have this soft spot for each other that, and in the end, they don't end up together, but it made me care about Pharaoh more, because she wasn't someone who had a lot of qualities that were super endearing. I didn't hate her at any point, because, it's her right to want revenge for being fucking raped. She can kill anyone she wants for that. If they raped her, you can kill them, right? Maybe it's not correct for her to want to just like genocide an entire nation of people, but I can understand her wanting revenge and her being so feral and treating everyone like they're horrible. Like, I get where that feeling comes from. So like, I never thought she was like a bad person per se, but she was kind of indiscriminately horrible to everyone. So like, that's kind of where the gray comes in for her character, I think. But her plotline, to me, I thought maybe it could have been fleshed out a little bit more, because really she's just there for the ride, right? She gets picked up by Yulwei, the other mage, and she kind of gets pulled along into this journey to go retrieve the seed. And then she uses the seed in the battle, like she holds on to it, and then she goes crazy, and then she runs away because she'll serve no master, which does fit thematically with her character. It is a satisfying end to her character arc, but I kept expecting there to be more. I kept expecting her to do something more, but she just kind of got strung along the whole time and then ran away. And I don't know. I kind of thought maybe there could have been some more added to give her further characterization, to give her further agency in the story, and we never really got that. She was a badass. She was cool as hell. She did some really awesome fights in this story, and I really liked that in the end she defied Baez and ran away. I think that was fitting for her character, and I like that she saw how revenge was kind of empty. It just fit really well with kind of resolving her emotional arc and everything, but I do wish that we had gotten a little bit more. And it's fine. It doesn't take anything away from the series for me, because I had so many other characters that I was invested in, but Pharaoh, I think, could have had some more page time, and I would have been fine with that, because she was constantly engaging. I mean, it's a simple setup for her character, but it's an effective one. It's one that is immediately makes you kind of root for her, and you understand her. So I was always enjoying when I was in her point of view. But yeah, I do kind of, I wish I had gotten more from her. So that's what I have to say about Pharaoh. Next, let's talk about West, who I think is one of the more interesting characters in this series. I think I haven't seen, online at least, I haven't seen like anybody talk about him. And I think in the third book, his arc is a little less interesting, but in the first two books, he goes through a lot of growth, and he has a very unique, like, internal battle, kind of like Jezal, because he's someone who is a good man. He's a better man than Jezreel at the beginning, obviously. But he is a good man, but he has such a bad temper. He beats the shit out of his sister, which makes you kind of hate him. Obviously, he beats the shit out of his fucking sister. But then in the second book, he kind of goes through some shit. He kills the prince, who's a piece of garbage, and who was trying to rape someone, and he becomes like a warrior who's like able to hone his temper to use it in battle, and he kind of learns how his temper in other scenarios is basically folly. It doesn't do anything for him, and you see him go through so much regret and guilt, and he's constantly thinking about his sister and how bad he feels about it. And that doesn't mean like it justifies what he did, or like you forgive him for that or whatever, but you see how he is a person who innately isn't like apathetic towards people. He has a very strong empathy bone, and he is trying to do the right thing. And to me, that's, for a character, you can make them do horrible things as long as you show them actively trying to be better. I mean, there's obviously a limit on that. If someone's a rapist or something, like, no, you're too far gone. But for something like what he did, I mean, he beat the shit out of his sister, which is damn near unforgivable. But you get enough time of him like suffering and going through stuff that you start to go like, okay, maybe you've gone through enough. Maybe you have a way forward where you deserve happiness, right? But damn, I'll be damned, West ends up with the saddest ending of them all, which is, I mean, there's a part of me that's like, if we're talking about what characters deserve, nobody truly, like, doesn't deserve their ending. All of them have their bad traits. West beat the shit out of his sister. There's few things you can do that are like worse. I mean, there's a list of things you can do, but it's not very long. And he ends up dying from the plague because a bunch of citizens are let into the city, right? And they all get sick, and there's a plague that's spreading. West catches it, and his last scene is so heartbreaking, because I did like him by the end of the series. But he's talking to Glokta, and he comes in, and he's got a cane, just like Glokta. He's missing his teeth, just like Glokta. His hair's falling out, just like Glokta. And we see someone who has been utterly defeated, and he's going to die shortly after the events of the book. I mean, we don't see him die, but we know he's going to die. And it's just like he went through all this. He had this whole, not exactly redemption arc, but you forgive him somewhat as a reader. You forgive his temper, and you forgive, because he does so many good things in the series, and you think, okay, he's going to return and he's going to have some kind of like solace that comes from that. But that's not how life works sometimes. Sometimes life gives you the plague, and that's what happens to West, and it's really depressing. It's genuinely so fucking depressing, man. It was so sad reading it. I was like, oh, this character that I spent all this time with, that I went through so much with, I was in the trenches with this character. I saw him struggle and fight tooth and nail, and now he's gonna die from the fucking plague? Oh my god, dude. I was just like it's like a knife in the chest, bro. Oh my god. That was easily the saddest of the plot lines. But West, I really liked him. And his plot line was, I think, almost as engaging as like the quote unquote like main characters. But I haven't seen very many people talk about him. I think he was also written very well, where he straddles that line very comfortably between being a good person and a bad person, leaning towards good for the most part, right? All right, one more before we talk about Baez, and this is the one that I think I'm going to have the least to say about, and that's Dogman. Dogman, is probably the best person in the series, weirdly enough. I mean, he has like a moment, I remember at the beginning of book 3, because he becomes chief of the Northmen and he has to order a bunch of innocent people to be killed, right? But it's kind of just like part of his duty because they're fighting a war. And so I can't really hold that to him, right? But like, for the most part, he's just a good person. Like, like he kills a bunch of people in the series, but they're always his enemies. It's war. People fucking kill each other. It's not like he chose the war. It's not like he went out of his way to start this war, right? Like, he's just a guy who's there. Dogman, I really liked. I mean, he was one of those characters who I just kind of enjoyed their presence, and it was cool to see him struggle with the duty of being a leader once he became the chief of the Northmen, and seeing how his opinion of Logan changed over time throughout the 3rd book, because he clearly idolized Logan before the book, and then he starts to learn more about him, and he remains friends with him, but seeing Logan through another Northman's eyes is it gave perspective, I guess, is kind of what I'm trying to say. And I really liked that Dogman gave us that other side of that culture, and kind of gave us this other viewpoint of this figure that we were so intimately familiar with in Logan, in seeing sort of how someone else would think about him that knew him for a long time, right? But Dogman, I would say he was probably the least interesting of the characters. I mean, I loved him, but like, he didn't really have anything crazy going on. I liked the gag, though, that he always had to pee during a battle. That was just funny and goofy to me. And it was literally every time. So it was cool that he continued that in the series. Joe Abercrombie, he had some funny stuff like that. The sayings and the little gags that persist throughout the series, like the Logan sayings and like Glocta saying, "Why do I do this?" The Dogman always having to pee. They gave character to the books. They gave, some flair to it. But that's it. Now we can talk about Baez. Because holy crap, what a great villain, dude. I think Baez might be my favorite villain. Like flat out my favorite villain in like any of the fantasy books that I've read. I mean, excluding like One Piece, but straight up my favorite villain, because he's literally the Gandalf trope. Wizened old wizard who comes and assembles a party to go on a journey. He has mysterious motives, and he kind of has answers for everyone. He's able to get them out of pickles and everything. And you think at the beginning that he's the good guy. You think that he has good intentions because there's this army of the Gurkish who are coming to attack the Union, and Baez is going to be the one who's able to stop them. Well, yeah, it turns out that Baez kind of caused this whole thing. They were coming for revenge because Baez killed a bunch of folks, and Baez has been manipulating history for thousands of years and using human lives as the tokens for his fucking evil game where he incites violence and then he throws bodies at it. And he literally just pulls the puppet strings for everyone throughout history, and he doesn't give a fuck about people at all. They're like ants to him. It's genius writing, the way, because even up until the end, I mean, when he uses the seed, it's so villainous, bro. I mean, he literally is like cackling and going, "It works! It works!" And he's like destroying the entire city. I don't know how anyone could read that and not think that Baez is the villain, but that's just me. But anyway, even after that, I was just like, we still don't know everything about this guy. And then you start to get the answers. He was the bank. He got a bunch of fucking babies from whores and just kind of planted them all throughout just in case one day he could plant one of them as king. He had all of these tokens on the fucking board, and he was moving them around the entire series, and we just were oblivious. The characters were oblivious. We didn't know what he was doing. And he ends up fucking everyone over and just doing everything to uphold the way of life, to uphold the structure of this world so that he remains at top. Because now he has the king in his pocket, he has the entire fucking government in his pocket, and he can control everything. So literally this entire series was to serve Baez's purpose. All of the characters, everything they did was to serve Baez's purpose and keep him on top. And they didn't even fucking know it, dude. He's evil. He is so evil. He is despicable. And dude, I mean, I guess like the Eaters are also evil. I mean, they're fucking cannibals, right? And they fight this whole war to get revenge on Baez, and that's also morally questionable. Like, come on, just let it go, I guess, right? Like, fuck, it was thousands of years ago. Fucking chill out, bro. Let it go. It happened a while ago. Anyway, but Baez started it. So, I mean, if anyone's more morally culpable here, it's fucking Baez, okay? He is the one that started it. He is the one that did the horrible things first. He is the one who did all this shit. Also, he kept talking shit about the Eaters, like, oh, they're such horrible people. I would never do that. But he had an Eater working for him the whole time. So he's, on top of all that, he's a hypocrite. Fuck Baez. Me and my homies hate Baez. Fuck Baez. we hate that guy. We hate his old ass. But man, dude, he's just such a good character. The way that everything unfolds throughout, and you see how the entire plot was all his machinations. Dude, I can only hope to be that good of a writer one day. Just, the villain was with you all along. It's literally evil Gandalf. Evil Gandalf. That's what Baez is. I fucking loved it. I loved seeing how the veil got pulled back and everyone realized that they had been hoodwinked by this fucking wizard. Fucking awesome, dude. It was great. I loved it. I loved this trilogy, man. I'm gonna go ahead and just say it. I think this is my favorite trilogy of all time. Just like book trilogy, I think this is my favorite trilogy now. It is so well written. Joe Abercrombie just has such a distinct voice. His prose is very straightforward, but it's also extremely effective. Like he doesn't mince words, he doesn't waste words. Everything on the page serves a purpose. Every little action that a character takes displays some kind of dynamic between them and another person, or what their state of mind is. He has a lot of really great sayings and one-liners throughout this series, and a lot of actually very philosophical ruminations throughout this entire series. He has a lot of really interesting ideas that he presents, and it is nihilism at its best. That at its core, the grimdark is very akin to nihilism, and he just shows it so well through the way that this plot resolves itself. And I just loved it, man. I think I talked about this maybe in my first podcast episode, but I think I'm going to have to rework my TBR because as it would happen, the sequel to First Law Trilogy, Best Served Cold, it is getting a movie adaptation. And literally the day that I finished The Last Argument of Kings, the last book in the First Law, they announced this movie. So it may have been my doing. I'm not going to say that Joe Abercrombie was watching my Goodreads, waiting for me to finish the book so that he could announce this movie, but the timing is a little suspect. That's all I'm going to say, all right? So, you're welcome. I guess you're welcome. I did this. Joe Abercrombie, I know you're watching this episode right now. Thank you for waiting for me to finish to announce this movie. I'm your biggest fan now. So, I'll go ahead and read the rest of your books so that you can go ahead and announce the First Law TV show, because that would be awesome. Okay, but seriously, this fucking book series would be amazing as a TV show. It would be so good. It doesn't need a huge budget because a lot of it is just people talking to each other, and most of the action is stuff that you could easily choreograph. You don't need crazy special effects or anything. You don't even need crazy sets. You don't need to build all that much. You can just use a lot of the plot takes place just in the countryside, and you could just go shoot somewhere natural. This doesn't need a crazy budget. The writing is perfectly tailored for a TV show. I am convinced that this would be damn near as big of a hit as Game of Thrones. If it got a full TV adaptation treatment, it would be so freaking good. So I'm so excited that they announced that they're adapting. It's a standalone sequel. It's called Best Served Cold. And now that it's been announced, I really want to fucking read it. And like I said, I think I'm gonna have to rework my TBR because Joe Abercrombie is now in my favorite authors list. I would say he's at the very least in my top 5 authors right now, maybe top 3. I loved this trilogy. I would give it a perfect 10 out of 10. I think there are no details wasted. Even and looking back on the first book, I thought it was slow and kind of boring when I first read it. I would have given it a 7 or 8 out of 10. But now, upon reflection, seeing everything it set up, it's also a 10 out of 10. This series is phenomenal. If you are a reader and you haven't picked this up, do it. Fucking do it. It's so good. It's such I'm done heaping praise on it, but man, what a journey. What a freaking journey. And I can't wait to see where the series goes from here, because I know that there's like a continuation of what happens in this story. Like it's like years in the future, but we see like the descendants of the characters in this book, and we see how the world has evolved. At least that's what I've heard online. So I'm very excited to eventually get to that. But I think that's it for this episode. I had a lot of fun talking about this. I've had so many thoughts bottled up inside for so long, so this has been a great time. But expect the next podcast episode early next week. I have a lot of other stuff that I've since started reading, since I finished reading the last First Law book. So you guys will hear about that then. So until then, I hope you're happy and healthy. I hope you're doing well, and I will see you then. Bye-bye.